from the end of the 1st century. Hard to tell. Ethiopian scholars hold that Ge'ez is the original language of the text. Ge'ez is that Ethiopian language. And that the Greek and Aramaic Roman copies were made. That they point out that that's the only complete text that we have is in Ge'ez. So, it is wholly extant in Ge'ez with Aramaic fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Which is first? Which is second? Interesting. A few Greek and Roman fragments. There's no consensus about the original language. Whatever. Some have proposed that it was written originally partially in Aramaic and partially in Hebrew. That's like Daniel, remember? And that would put it even in a more older period, in my opinion. But in any case, there's a short section of 1st Enoch that is quoted in the New Testament. If you guys remember the letter of Jude, if you remember the notes in your Bible, it will mention this. This is a direct quote. Let's see, I have it here, I have it someplace. It talks about Enoch the 7th from Adam. It has been argued for a long time that all the writers of the New Testament are familiar with this document and influenced by the thought prediction, because you see a lot of evidences in the New Testament text from Enoch, from 1st Enoch. I got some details about it, we'll just kind of, we got some Aramaic fragments from Quran, etc., etc. Here's the quotes. Let me see, how many are there? Let's see, is this the Jude one? I think this is Jude. Behold, he will arrive with 10 million and the holy ones in order to execute judgment upon all, who destroy the wicked ones and censure with all flesh on account of everything that they have done, and which the sinners, the wicked ones, committed against him. And in Jude, it says, it quotes, it was also about these that Enoch, the 7th generation from Adam, prophesied, saying, see, the Lord is coming with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment on all, etc., etc. It's a direct quote. So, next time somebody tells you, I've heard this all the time, there are no quotes from the Apocrypha in the New Testament. They say, well, it's at least from the Pseudographia, it's quoted, well, if you're Ethiopian, it's your Apocrypha, but, other than that. So, this is a really neat text. Let's see, and there are, of Enoch, I think there's like 60-something quotes. So this is why most scholars believe that the New Testament writers really knew Enoch well. And if you notice a lot of revelations in here, 42, 45, we'd be here all day if I had to go through all these, 50, Sometimes it drives me crazy trying to put these in, but I didn't want to lose them. 61 indirect quotes or allusions to Enoch in the New Testament. Not to mention it's a direct quote. Second Enoch, known as Slavonic Enoch, or the Secrets of Enoch, considered to be part of apocalyptic literature. It's a late 1st century. The text has been preserved only in Slavonic, but we also found some Coptic fragments in 2009. Greek is indicated as the language behind the Slavonic version. It's not, Jews, Christians, most do not identify as scripture. But look what it was written in the late 1st century, which puts it in the realm of Revelation, right? So you might ask yourself the question, well, why isn't this included in early Christian literature? That's the reason I include it, because there are no allusions nor quotes from this document in the New Testament. But yet it was written in the same period and may have had a similar sources. So interesting. Anyway, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on 2nd Enoch, but basically it is an apocalyptic literature, and you notice Revelations is apocalyptic, right? So, and in Enoch, when the age is taken by 2 angels and made to pass through the 7 heavens, one by one. There are parallels, right? No direct allusions, no direct quotes, but there are parallels in the New Testament documents. Because remember, Paul was taken up to the 3rd heaven. We'll find that as another quote. I can't remember the first thing that made it past it. But in the 3rd heaven, he finds paradise, as in 2 Corinthians 12:2. In any case, it is likely that the New Testament authors either knew about this document or some may have been a writer of it. The last section, referred to as the exaltation of Melchizedek, outlines the priestly succession of Enoch. It talks about Melchizedek and the eternal priesthood of Melchizedek. Where does that come from? Or okay, either this came from a general idea of the period, or it came from Hebrews, Hebrews, right? Right? The priesthood of Melchizedek. You ever wonder where that came from? Where, the biblical source was known before this, but Enoch, second Enoch, actually documents it. It's a late-day document, so what can we hold? This is a view of the times. So we think, for example, the idea of the priesthood of Melchizedek as something that just suddenly sprung up, right? In Paul's mind, for example, or Apollos wrote Hebrews. But he didn't. It's a thought in the period. Let's see, no New Testament allusions. Second Bible, thought to have been written in the late 1st century CE, or maybe the early 2nd century. But you know what? I think most all the New Testament documents were written before the end of the 1st century. I think it's easy to put them within that. But a lot of scholars don't think that. Some scholars think that early 2nd century, which I think is foolish because we've got documents that easily document them earlier than that. But in any case, this one was either written in the late 1st century, but after the destruction of the temple. So it's attributed to the biblical Baruch, and that's why it is associated with the Old Testament, but it is considered pseudegraphia, right? See that? The important point of this is, for example, it is included in some volumes of Peshitta, which is that Jewish prayer document or psalm document. It's really long. But in any case, what is interesting about this is God reveals to Baruch the imminent destruction of Jerusalem and asks him to leave the city along with all of the pious persons. See this prophetic model? Now what is really interesting about this is this document, there are 14 allusions to the New Testament found in 2nd Baruch. They're put here. So what does that prove about the New Testament documents? I told you that Baruch was written either the late part of the 1st century or the early part of the 2nd century. So if this document includes allusions to New Testament works, what does it mean? That they were written before. Do you see the point here? All the allusions that we find in Baruch simply prove that the New Testament documents were written before it was. So if this was written after the fall of Jerusalem, the end of the 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century, this is the second document I've shown you this way. We have one in the Apocryphal documents that's like this, that is not considered, that's in the Eastern Orthodox Apocryphal documents, but not in the King James or the Catholic. But we have a pseudegraphia book, in other words, a book that is not considered scriptural or canonical, that attributes New Testament allusions. So if you have friends that say, secular friends or whoever, that say, look, there's no proof the New Testament was written in this period. You got 2nd Baruch. And most scholars believe can pinpoint when this was written pretty well. So proof text of New Testament documents. The point I'm trying to make here is, we might want to shun these works. Some people might, okay, your pastor might not like these works. Your Sunday school teacher might not like these works. You might not like these works. But what do some of these works do? They prove the New Testament. They prove the context of the New Testament. They prove the period of time in the New Testament. That makes them pretty important works, right? And worth looking at, in my opinion. So in any case. The Assumption of Moses, also called the Testament of Moses. There are so many of these, right? Our viewpoint is, what? There's nothing out there. There's all this stuff. Assumption of Moses. known from a 6th century incomplete manuscript in Latin. It was discovered by this guy. Basically published in 1861. We found it, we know of this document because ancient writers, including Gelasius and Origen, cite the Assumption of Moses. They make it the reference of the dispute of the body of Moses that's talked about in the Epistle of Jude, between the Archangel Michael and Satan. You know, I've had this told me many times. They said, you know, I've heard people say that we don't know where this came from. Well, yeah, we know where this came from, about, you know, the Archangel Michael fighting for the body of Moses with Satan. It comes from the Assumption of Moses. It's a pretty ancient text. And like I said, Origen knew about it, and so did this Gelasius. So, well, you know, we just lost the document. Finally, we found it. There's 12 chapters, purports to be a secret prophecies of Moses revealed to Joshua before the passing of leadership to Israelites to him. There are, let's see, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of quotes. Let's see. I did want to point out a couple of these because Clement says, Clement of Alexandria and Origen say that Jude 9 directly refers to the Assumption of Moses, when it says, but when the Archangel Michael contended with the devil and disputed about the body of Moses, he did not dare to bring a commendation of slander against him, but said, the Lord rebuke you. So go back and check Jude, and you'll find this from the Assumption of Moses. And by the way, that's a direct quote from the Assumption of Moses in the New Testament. I'm just going to breeze over this, but the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, these are the dying commands of the 12 sons of Jacob. It's part of the Oscan Armenian Orthodox Bible of 1666. We have found fragments of similar writings at Quran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The opinions are divided if they're the same text. It's considered apocalyptic literature. But we have some pretty good pieces of it. They were written in Greek and reached the final in the 2nd century. In the 13th century, they were introduced to the West because they were mostly Eastern Orthodox type work. Became very popular with the Bishop of Lincoln, who basically, you know, believed they were a genuine work. And we do think they may, well, we know they're not a genuine work of the 12 sons. They're pseudegraphial, right? But yet he thought they were good to read, good to study. So the Anglican Church kind of got into that. In any case, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. With the critical methods of the 16th century, basically they rejected the books. But guess what about the critical methods of the 16th century? They're wrong. Because, you know, we know that it's an original Jewish document that was retouched by Christians, or maybe a Christian document that was written in Greek from some earlier Semitic material. So we've got, you know, modern scholars today know that these are pretty, you know, they've been messed with, okay, over the time. But we got pieces, parts of them, and we got some good proof that they existed early. Let's see. Got the Testament of Reuben considering admonishing lust and sinfulness. You can tell why the Bishop of Lincoln may have liked this stuff. It's good stuff. We've got, let's see, two allusions to it in the New Testament. The Testament of Levi, predominantly concerning arrogance. We've got one or two, three allusions, 4 allusions, 5 allusions, 6 allusions to this in the New Testament. The Testament of Zebulun, the 6th son of Levi, and Leah and Jacob. He describes a dinner and philanthropist. Basically, we've got one pretty long one long allusion. The Testament of Dan treats the topics of anger and lying. Let's see how many, 2 of these. The Testament of Naphtali. We discovered a copy of this at Quran in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that pretty much sets the tone, right? Bishop Lincoln was right. Well, kind of right. At least partially right.